evening, everyone. I'm Alma Angeles for NET25 World News. On tonight's top stories. A nation on edge following the deadly New Year's Eve vehicle ramming attack in New Orleans. U.S. law enforcement and intelligence agencies are on high alert for potential copycat incidents. President Biden has blocked Nippon Steel's bid for U.S. Steel, citing national security concerns. Putting the dog who lived with a victim of the recent Jeju air crash has been rescued. The elderly man and his family tragically perished in the accident, leaving Pudding alone. Heartbreakingly, he was found still waiting for them to return. And the news starts now. The FBI said that the suspect in the Tesla Cybertruck that exploded outside the Trump International Hotel in Las Vegas had no animosity towards President-elect Donald Trump and likely had post-traumatic stress disorder. At a press conference held by the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, Assistant Sheriff Dory Corrin also read letters written by Matthew Livelsberger, 37, and these were found in a surveillance log on a notes application used by the suspect to document his activities in the 10 days leading up to the explosion.
But we're able to take this phone and be able to extract the data using a variety of different tools. And in that, we've identified a variety of information, but one thing in particular is there was an application in there that the suspect used to take notes. In that application, one of the notes is titled Surveillance Log by the Suspect. It appears to be more of a journal of activity. It dates for about 10 days leading up to the incident, from December 21st to December 31st of this past year. In the note application, he seemed to have two letters. One letter in particular, as you can see here, this is an excerpt from that letter. He says, fellow service members, veterans, and all Americans, time to wake up. We are being led by weak and feckless leadership who only serve to enrich themselves. He goes on to explain a variety of other grievances and issues, some political, some personal. But then there's a second letter where there's some more excerpts. This one seems to be dated after the fact in that notes application. And in there, you can read a couple of the excerpts. We are the United States of America, the best country, people to ever exist. But right now, we are terminally ill and headed towards collapse. This was not a terrorist attack. It was a wake-up call. Americans only pay attention to spectacles and violence. What better way to get my point across than a stunt with fireworks and explosives? Why did I personally do it now? I need to cleanse my mind of the brothers I've lost and relieve myself of the burden of the lives I took. He does offer additional information that is varying on the spectrum in terms of political grievances, issues about the conflicts elsewhere, not here, domestic issues, societal issues, a variety of other things, including personal challenges as well. As you'll see here in this video here at one of the charging stations, is just one example. You'll see our suspect here. He'll exit the vehicle. He'll walk around the vehicle at different times. At one point, you're going to see that he opens the door of the vehicle, he retrieves a coat, he puts that coat on, and you're going to see that at different parts to include the photo that the sheriff talked about just a few minutes ago. We use this video information as well as what I said earlier about the financial records in terms of purchases being made with different credit cards, call data records, a video canvas at multiple locations, trying to use all of that to corroborate that the individual that we've identified is the same individual that drove that Tesla during that route that we've identified to Las Vegas.
We have interviewed family members, friends, the subject's associates, and military members that he served with around the globe. Through these interviews, we've found that the subject held no animosity towards the president-elect. Yeah, so in terms of the so-called manifesto that's circulating online, we have strong evidence to suggest that it was the subject that wrote it, but we haven't conclusively proven that yet. And that evidence relates to other evidence that we're finding that we're able to compare that lead us to believe it was in fact him who sent it.
The FBI reiterated there was no definitive link between the New Year's Day New Orleans truck attack that killed over a dozen people and the Cybertruck explosion in Las Vegas later on the same day, which left 7 people with minor injuries. In the days since the U.S. Army veteran drove a truck into dozens of New Year's Day, normalcy has begun to return to a stricken yet defiant New Orleans. Music was again streaming from clubs and restaurants filled with tourists, but people still paid tribute to the victims of the attack.
I've known Reggie since I was 21 years old, and he was a good father. He was always like the life of the party, would help people. I want to make sure that everyone knows that he will be always remembered. This is a beautiful city full of beautiful people, and unfortunately this is a tragedy that happened, and hopefully people all over the world can learn and see what this is like and not do it again somewhere else.
Restaurant staff and patrons said they were reassured to see many police officers and other camouflage outfitted patrols prominent on Bourbon Street, which is often busy into the night with partying tourists.
I think that they're doing the right things, trying to fix the guards, the gates, and I think it's hard to be able to take care of everybody. You can't anticipate, as much as they try to anticipate what could happen, things are going to happen. And I feel safe. I feel very safe. The police presence, and I felt safe that night. I was telling my friend, there is so much police presence here on New Year's Eve, before this even happened. So much. I felt safe that night. And then this happens. I feel safe now. You don't know what can happen.
The city, nicknamed the Big Easy for its usually relaxed mood, has weathered many storms, including catastrophic Hurricane Katrina in 2005, which killed more than 1,300 in and around New Orleans.
Well, being from New Orleans, a native born, to actually see this kind of atmosphere and actually to see the outpour of love and everybody, the compassion coming together. It reminds me of the year of Katrina, when everybody came together and kind of showed that we can be a community at large and come together and support each other in time of crises.
The mayor said security will remain heightened in the city, which is readying for major events in the coming weeks. The New Orleans area depends on its tourism and conference industries and attracted 17.8 million visitors in 2023, according to state data. U.S. law enforcement and intelligence agencies are on alert for potential copycat vehicle ramming attacks following the New Year's Day tragedy in New Orleans, where a U.S. Army veteran drove a truck into crowds, killing at least 15 people and injuring dozens more. The FBI identified the attacker, 42-year-old Shamsuddin Jabbar from Texas, as being 100% inspired by the Islamic State. He flew an ISIS flag from the back of the rented truck before being fatally shot by police. A joint intelligence bulletin from the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, and the National Counterterrorism Center warns that vehicles remain a popular tool for attackers because they're easy to obtain and require minimal skill to use as weapons. While ISIS has not officially claimed responsibility, its online supporters have praised the attack, along with the December 20 incident in Germany, despite no confirmed links to the group there.
So in the last 10 years, we've really seen ISIS embrace vehicle rammings, and we've seen it in several European countries. We also saw it in New York, where someone used a vehicle to run down people on a path. So this is certainly part of the Islamic State MO. And so it's not surprising that if the person were affiliated with the Islamic State, that this might be a direction they would go in. And of course, as we saw so tragically in New Orleans, it is a way to kill large numbers of people in a relatively short period of time.
Some online users have even used these incidents to call for violence against groups like immigrants and Muslims.
On motives, there's a lot of variation in terms of how people express motives. Sometimes people, again, simply talk to friends or connections. Sometimes people leave manifestos or leave notes. People, especially of younger generations, often post a lot of information on social media about what they believe in. But sometimes we simply don't find much information. That violence happens, an individual does something, and we're left to puzzle why. And we can infer based on their actions or a few cryptic words here or there, but often we don't have a full picture.
Despite suffering major losses in Syria and Iraq, ISIS continues to spread propaganda and recruit followers online.
This is, of course, a tremendous concern because military people are trained to use weapons. Some are trained to explosives. In general, they're more disciplined. So a lot of times would-be terrorists or would-be attackers mess up and make a lot of stupid mistakes. And people with a military background certainly at times make mistakes, but often are less likely to do so. But for a lot of these people, they see themselves as warriors. Right? And they're not really trying to hide their activities. They're proud of them. And so they know that they're probably going to die when they do the attack. And so they're going to go forth and they're less concerned about clandestine means. But of course, if an individual is part of a group and the group wants to do multiple attacks, they're going to push the individual to try to minimize the visible connections so the group itself can keep operating.
Louisiana Republican Mike Johnson secured re-election as Speaker of the House, U.S. House of Representatives, after a narrow vote, overcoming party divisions with last-minute support from key holdouts.
The Honorable Mike Johnson of the state of Louisiana, having received a majority of the votes cast, is duly elected Speaker of the House of Representatives for the 119th Congress.
Louisiana Republican Mike Johnson was re-elected as the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives on Friday by a razor-thin margin. After a roll call vote that lasted nearly 2 hours, two Republican opponents switched their votes to support Johnson after lengthy negotiations.
Today, my friends, our nation is the envy of the world. Why? Because we have been marked by a spirit and a people who are explicitly that. We are explicitly American.
It's not immediately clear what made Representatives Ralph Norman and Keith Self change their minds. Another 6 Republicans had initially declined to vote at all before casting ballots for Johnson. The vote served as an early test for the Republican Party, as it tries to advance President-elect Donald Trump's agenda of tax cuts and border enforcement.
We have a mandate, and that was shown in the election cycle. The people want an America First agenda. They do. Sadly, for the past 4 years of divided government, too many politicians in Washington have done the opposite. Open borders and overregulation have destroyed our cities and stifled innovation. Inflation and weak leadership have left Americans poorer, and they have placed our country in a perilous position. That's right. To that end, this Congress will renounce the status quo, and we will listen to the voices of the people. We will act quickly, and we will start by defending our nation's borders. That's the #1 priority. Yes. In coordination with President Trump, this Congress will give our border and immigration enforcement agents the resources that they need to do their job. We will secure the border, we will deport dangerous, criminal, illegal aliens, and finally finish building the border wall.
It also tested Trump's clout on Capitol Hill, where a handful of Republicans have shown a willingness to defy him. Trump endorsed Johnson on Monday, following weeks of uncertainty.
Myanmar's military government will release 5,864 prisoners, including 180 foreigners, under an amnesty marking the Southeast Asian nation's Independence Day, according to state media. Myanmar has been in turmoil since early 2021, when the military overthrew an elected civilian government and violently suppressed pro-democracy protests, sparking a nationwide armed rebellion. The junta has said it will hold elections this year, but the plan has been widely condemned by opposition groups as a sham. The humanitarian crisis in Myanmar is worsening, according to a UN spokesperson.
Turning to Myanmar, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that the crisis there is deepening. Conflict persists in many parts of the country, and the fighting in Rakhine has recently escalated. Civilians continue to face extreme risks, acute food insecurity, and a total collapse of critical public services. Conflict has driven more than 3.5 million people from their homes, marking a staggering increase of nearly 1.5 million internally displaced persons compared to last year. As a reminder, at the end of 2024, the nearly $1 billion humanitarian needs and response plan was funded at only 36%. This year, humanitarian needs in Myanmar are expected to reach unprecedented levels, with nearly 20 million people in need of assistance, compared to last year's 18.6 million. The 2025 Humanitarian Response Plan aims to reach 5.5 million people with assistance, requiring funding of $1.1 billion.
Israeli airstrikes have targeted dozens of Hamas positions in Gaza over the last 24 hours, resulting in over 110 casualties, and that is according to Palestinian health officials. This escalation comes as efforts to reach a ceasefire and secure the release of Israeli hostages intensify, with a deadline before U.S. President-elect Donald Trump assumes office on January 20. The violence also continues to impact civilians. The Gaza Health Ministry reports that over 40 people were killed on Friday alone, after 71 were killed the previous day, including in Al-Mawasi, an area previously designated a humanitarian safe zone by Israel. Israel is defending its controversial raid on Kamal Adwan Hospital, meanwhile, which it says was used by Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad militants. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization has called for the release of the hospital's director, who was detained during the raid. Palestinian officials have condemned the attack. The UN Security Council convened to address the issue, with Palestinian envoy Riyad Mansour urging action.
In most instances, Israel alleges that the hospitals were being improperly used for military purposes by Palestinian armed groups. I've in fact just received a letter from the Israeli ambassador asserting that Kamal Adwan Hospital was militarized by Hamas and that Israeli forces took extraordinary measures to protect civilian life while acting on credible intelligence. Yet, Israel has not provided sufficient information to substantiate many of these claims, which are often vague and broad. In some cases, they appear to be contradicted by publicly available information. This is why I'm calling for independent, thorough, and transparent investigations into all Israeli attacks on hospitals, healthcare infrastructure, and medical personnel, as well as the alleged misuse of such facilities.
Despite repeated calls by Israel to cease the unlawful military use of the hospital since the start of the operation in October, these warnings were again ignored and disregarded. This week's precise operation by the IDF revealed the extent of Hamas's abuse of the facility. Over 240 terrorists were apprehended, including 15 who participated in the October 7th massacre, the darkest day in Israel's modern history, where over 1,200 lives were brutally taken by the terrorists. Among those apprehended was the hospital director himself, who is suspected of being a Hamas operative, as hundreds of Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists were hiding inside the Kamal Adwan Hospital under his management. He is currently being investigated by Israeli security forces.
Dr. Mahmoud Abu Nujila, who was killed in an Israeli airstrike on Al-Auda Hospital, wrote a message many months ago on a whiteboard in the hospital normally used for planning surgeries. And I quote him, Whoever stays until the end will tell the story. We did what we could. Remember us. Remember us. We owe them more than remembrance. Nothing can explain that for 15 months Palestinians in Gaza have endured hell and been abandoned to this fate.
The situation remains critical, with both sides at an impasse as the toll on civilians continues to rise. Poland launched its presidency of the Council of the European Union with an emphasis on security as the bloc faces the return of Donald Trump to the White House, deteriorating trade relations with China, and Russia's grinding war in Ukraine.
The motto of the Polish presidency is Security Europe. Our union was born as a project of peace after World War II. And we need to strengthen once again our security to ensure peace in Europe. Therefore, Ukraine must remain our top priority. This year, we must continue to stand with Ukraine as much as necessary for as long as it takes to win a comprehensive, just and lasting peace. International law must prevail for the freedom of Ukrainian people and for our common security. For that, we must continue to see defense as a strategic priority for the European Union.
Poland is seeking a leading role in shaping European policy, especially on security, and Prime Minister Donald Tusk is a well-connected figure on the EU stage. But as European capitals face tough decisions on issues such as how to bolster and finance defense spending, analysts say Warsaw is unlikely to be able to lead on its own. Regarding Europe's collective security and support for Kiev, some analysts said Germany, Europe's biggest economy, could take on a bigger role after its February 23 national election, which the Conservatives are currently tipped to win. A Finnish court denied a request for the release of an oil tanker suspected by police of damaging an undersea power line and 4 telecommunications cables in the Baltic Sea last week. Finland on December 26 seized the Eagle S tanker carrying Russian oil on suspicion that it damaged the finished Estonian Estlink 2 power line and the telecoms cables the previous day by dragging its anchor across the seabed. Baltic Sea nations are on high alert after a string of outages of power cables, telecom links, and gas pipelines since Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. NATO said last week it will boost its presence in the region. A lawyer representing United Arab Emirates-based Caravella LLC FC, which owns the tanker, had sought the release of the vessel and crew. But Finland's National Bureau of Investigation has impounded the vessel, and the Finnish Customs Office has seized its cargo of 35,000 tons of unleaded petrol while it investigates whether sanctions against Russia have been reached.
Let us first of all state that the Finnish authorities have acted very promptly and with determination in this matter. The action of the vessel was stopped, the situation was brought under control, and now an investigation into it is underway, and that is a good thing.
The Finnish Parliament's Defense Committee held an extraordinary meeting about recent incidents in the Baltic on Friday. Its chair said investigations were ongoing. The Customs Service believes the Eagle S is part of a shadow fleet of aging tankers being used to evade sanctions on the sale of Russian oil. The Eagle S vessel, which is registered in the Cook Islands, was brought to a bay near Finland's port of Porvoo, where police are currently collecting evidence and questioning the crew, who are Georgian and Indian citizens.
Old. We have regulated as human beings maritime issues already from the Hanseatic times in Europe. And the current international law enables to do a lot to protect, but still it's much more oriented to the problems we had during the older times. And now, due to the very rapid technological developments, like the enormous amount of undersea infrastructure that enables the economies to develop, that enables the governments to exchange information, that enables all the services we offer to our people, but also, for example, underwater drones and all these issues. Estonia thinks, as many other countries, that in a longer perspective, there is a need for looking over the international maritime law. Of course, when a ship drags anchors along the seabed, long way, it can't go unnoticed. So the threats that maritime law has dealt so far, like piracy and unauthorized broadcasting. So this dragging the anchor in order to harm the undersea infrastructure is something that is not so specifically covered by the international law.
The U.S. Surgeon General is calling for stronger health warnings on alcoholic beverages, saying they should carry labels highlighting their cancer risks. In a new advisory, Dr. Vivek Murthy emphasized that alcohol consumption raises the livelihood of developing cancers, including breast, colon, and liver cancer. He also urged a review of current alcohol consumption guidelines to help people make informed decisions about their health. The advisory noted that alcohol contributes to 100,000 cancer cases and 20,000 cancer-related deaths annually in the U.S., a figure surpassing alcohol-linked traffic fatalities. And despite this, the health warning labels on alcoholic drinks introduced in 1988 have not been updated since. Dr. Elizabeth Platts, a cancer epidemiologist at Johns Hopkins, points out that public awareness remains divided.
For a long time, we've known that alcohol is a cancer risk factor, in particular for breast cancer, including for certain head and neck cancers, especially in smokers, colon cancer even. So we've known this for a long time. But the public didn't know. And there were many competing messages about alcohol, including related to cardiovascular disease. So our message wasn't as obvious to the general public. So it's about time that now everyone will know that alcohol drinking is a risk factor. So I'm glad to see it. So research tells us that about half of Americans know that alcohol is a cancer risk factor and the other half doesn't know. And again, they're competing messages related to cardiovascular disease, but also they're important messages about don't drink and drive, don't overconsume alcohol because it increases the risk of people getting into fights and not being able to function well. So there were important competing messages, but now it's clear, and we need to make it even clearer to the public, that even moderate levels of alcohol drinking are a cancer risk factor.
However, not everyone believes warning labels will make a difference.
I don't think it would make any difference. If people want to drink, they will drink regardless of any warnings. It's like with the smoking. I'm a smoker myself, and the warnings haven't put me off at all because it's an addiction. So if you're going to do it, you're going to do it regardless of any warnings.
I've taken care of a lot of people that have damaged their body from smoking and alcohol, and we try to get them off of it while they're in the hospital, and a lot of them get drunk on the way home. So I don't think it's going to make that big of a difference.
Dr. Platts adds that while alcohol was once thought to offer some heart benefits, the risks far outweigh any positive effects.
Ethanol can increase levels of HDL cholesterol. That's good cholesterol. And so that was one of the reasons why it was thought that alcohol drinking would protect against cardiovascular disease. At this time, the benefits are not, they don't outweigh the risks related to alcohol drinking in general. So we have to think about alcohol and its effects on so many health states and people's ability to be productive in society. So if you take everything together, the small benefit related to cardiovascular disease doesn't outweigh the other potential harms of alcohol drinking, including drinking at moderate levels.
A nationwide IT outage disrupted police systems at German airports, causing long delays at border control for passengers arriving from outside the EU's Schengen zone. Now, federal police confirmed the issue, forcing officers to process non-Schengen travelers annually. The cause remains unclear, but the impact was felt at major airports, including Frankfurt, the country's busiest hub. Berlin Airport also reported longer wait times for non-Schengen arrivals, while Düsseldorf Airport said disruptions began around 2 p.m. local time, with staff providing water to waiting passengers. According to regional broadcaster WDR, some travelers faced up to 2-hour delays at immigration, while others were kept on their planes during the backup. A Japanese woman once recognized by Guinness World Records as the world's oldest has passed away at 116. Tomiko Ituka, born on May 23, 1908, lived in Ashia, Yogo Prefecture. She had held the title of the world's oldest person since August 2024, following the death of Spain's Maria Brañas Morera at 117. NHK reports that Ituca was living in a nursing home in Asia when she died of old age on December 29. Now, Brazilian Ina Canavaro Lucas, who was born just 16 days after Ituca, has become the world's oldest person. According to the Gerontology Research Group, a US-based scientific organization specializing in aging studies. And finally in our news, Pudding, a dog whose family tragically perished in the airplane crash disaster at South Korea's Muwon International Airport on December 29th, is starting over. The family of 9, including Pudding's owners, were traveling back from Thailand after celebrating a birthday when Jeju Air Flight 7C 2216 veered off the runway upon landing. Heartbroken and alone, Pudding remained near the family's home, watching for their return. The community rallied around the grieving dog, providing food and comfort. Coexistence of animal rights on Earth. Care Korea received reports of Pudding sitting near the village hall, seemingly waiting for his family. After contacting surviving relatives, Care Korea took custody of the dog. Pudding was immediately taken to a veterinary hospital for health checks, as its vomit reportedly contained harmful substances like onions and chicken bones. Now, Care Korea will provide temporary care for Pudding until a loving and suitable new home can be found for this resilient companion. And with that, we end tonight's broadcast. For everyone here on NET25, I'm Alma Angeles. Thank you for joining us. Good night.